So when we're in Boxy SVG, you'll see that we've got our toolbars and our panels. And what I want you to do on your toolbar over here on the left is if you scroll, you'll see there's a lot more stuff down here. These first couple we're going to use a lot, the transform and the edit. But for right now, we're going to scroll down and practice drawing shapes. So if you see one at the rectangle, if I click and drag with my mouse, I get a rectangle. If I do that while I'm holding shift, I get a perfect square. So that keeps it in perfect proportion. With the circle, it's a little different. There's a circle tool and there's an ellipse tool. And the ellipse tool will draw, any kind of ellipse, oval, that kind of thing, while the circle tool will always stay in perfect proportion as a circle. But with the ellipse tool, I can hold shift and also get a perfect circle. So there's a few options there. Anytime I'm in a shape tool, instead of going all the way up here to get my transform, I can just hit escape and I'll have my transform tool. The transform tool lets me move things around. It lets me scale them bigger. And you'll notice if I'm not holding shift, it starts to warp. If I hold shift while I scale things, it'll always stay in proportion, which is almost always what we want to do. So make sure when you're stretching things that you hold shift so you don't all of a sudden warp it in a way you didn't intend. If you click it a second time, you'll notice it turns all the little handles a different color. You've got these red and orange ones now. And this lets you play with the perspective and to rotate it. I'm going to hop over to the rectangle for a second, and I'm going to grab this edit tool. The edit tool gives me the anchor points or nodes that are building these vector-based shapes. So now I can kind of play with them that way. So let me delete all of these so I can show you a little bit more what these do. And I'm just hitting backspace on my keyboard to get rid of those. So as we get into some more of these more interesting shapes, let's do the pie, for example. I'm going to hit escape to get my transform tool so I don't have to scroll all the way up there. But I am going to scroll up there for the edit tool. And so that edit tool is showing us the points. So now I can click and I can drag these points to edit that shape more. Let's do that with another one. Let's get a cog. Get the edit tool. And again, it'll let us kind of work with the different sizes of things and shapes of things. Another place that you can kind of play with that is over here. Is over here in the geometry panel. So in the geometry panel, you can adjust things like display. So that's kind of like how the spread of the points on the cog, how many teeth it has, the size of it, of the radius, of the different radiuses, the radii. So you can play with a lot of settings here in the geometry panel. Down here, this is going to have to do with more with the placement and the size itself, the rotation. So you can look around here in this geometry panel to find different options based on your shape. If I look at the arrow shape, I'm going to click and drag it. And then over here, I can change how long the head of the arrow is, how thick it is, the thickness of the base. So that geometry panel is going to be really helpful as you're building with shapes as well. Starting to learn some shortcuts is going to be really helpful as you're working. Command Z is a really important one. So if you do something and suddenly you realize that's not what you wanted, you can just Control Z and it undoes the last action. Shift Control Z will redo it. Another good shortcut to know is Control A. That selects everything. So that way now I can rotate all of them, or I can scale all of them. You can also hold Shift and select on more than one thing, and now I can scale those up. So you'll see that if you know other programs, a lot of the same kind of commands will come through in this program as well. As you're playing with shapes, I also want you to experiment with color. So as I select an object that I've designed, like this really important circle, got to be able to do circles, right? I can go in here and change the fill to this green. Fill, remember, is the inside color of a shape. You'll see there's a lot of different options in here. There's gradients, radial gradient, a pattern, or none. None means there's nothing there. It's empty. Stroke, which is the little paintbrush, the skinnier paintbrush, that's going to be the outline. Right now it has none, so I'm going to give it a color and make it a little thicker. And you'll see there's lots of options in here you can play with. Make it dotted. And so think of it as the left side is building your shape or your path or your text, and the right side is editing it. Those panels are going to let you do a lot of things. As you can see right now, my green dashed line circle thing is behind the gray circle. And let's say I want it to be in the front. I'm going to click on it here, go up to my menus, go to Object, and go to Raise or Raise to Front. And now it's in front of the other one. So your menus have options for things too. You can kind of look around and see, and you'll notice that it's showing you the shortcuts here. So in here, in this program, to zoom in, a shortcut is just the equal sign. So if I'm over here working and I want to zoom in, I can just do the equal sign, go to my pan, move over, and if I want to zoom out, it's the minus sign. So it's really good to learn those hotkeys. I'll put together a list that we'll share out with you. So if you want to print it or have it up on a screen so you can start to learn those, because they're a little bit different than other programs if you've used Illustrator or Photoshop before. So what I want you to experiment with today is just building with shapes and looking at what you can do with very simple shapes. So before we get into the building our own kind of custom shapes, I want to see you really experiment with the built shapes and what can you make out of those. Just using regular shapes, what objects could you make? That's your first challenge.